Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Beyond the Hire podcast, where we dive into recruiting for the go to market space, what it takes to build winning teams, and how industry leaders got to where they are today. My name is Sandra, and I'm the VP of Marketing here at Bets. We're also accompanied by Aisha, who is the marketing manager. Hi, Aisha.
Hello.
And then our guest today is Megan Conlon. She is currently the head of TA at Miro. She has 15 years of recruiting experience in multiple industries, including hospitality, finance, and SaaS. She's been part of agencies. She's been an in-house recruiter, and she's led global teams across North America, LATAM, EMEA, APAC, pretty much everywhere. She was at Miro for 5 years and is currently at Miter. So much to talk about. Obviously, we love Miter here at Bets, but I also personally am a big fangirl of Miro. We love our Miro boards. We use them quite often.
Love it.
Love
Miro.
I know. I literally, whatever we sketch out, we do it in Miro, especially your customer journey and your lead journey. It's a really cool product. So we want to talk about all the things because you had quite the journey there before you joined Miter. But first, thank you, Megan, for joining us.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Did I do a good job introducing you? Did I forget anything?
You did a great job. It was actually a little overwhelming to hear it all back.
Yes, internal high five for myself. If I wasn't holding a microphone, I would give myself a little pat on the back. All right, so let's start then. And like I said, we're big Miro fans here at Bets, especially the marketing team, because we use it so much. Maybe we kind of start there. How did you end up at Miro?
How did I end up at Miro? So I was at an early stage startup prior to Miro. I had moved to Austin, Texas with my then fiance and was out of a job and found myself joining a great startup that is still in business called Restaurant 365. And that was really my first foray into SaaS tech and full cycle recruiting. And that was a great experience. Unfortunately, as you can guess, the restaurant industry really got hit very quickly when COVID spread across the world. And so I was part of a mass layoff. They laid off the entire recruiting team. And I was one of those success stories whereby I was scooped up within a week of being laid off. It was wild. Was laid off on a Monday, interviewed on a Tuesday, offered on a Friday, started the next Monday. Just bonkers. That does not happen. And then my Miro journey started, and it's been career defining. That was truly a career defining stop in my recruiting trajectory. So I'm very, very excited to talk about Miro, and then also obviously about Miter as well.
That's crazy and aspirational, and I'm sure what every single person who's ever been laid off dreamed about.
I know.
Wow. So wait, did you see the job posting online and then apply for it? Did they reach out to you? How did you even see the job?
Yeah, such a great question. And I still owe my partner Reed a steak dinner and a very, very expensive bottle of champagne because he had been in the interview process with Miro prior to the layoff happening. He was very smart in trying to get ahead of that. And they ended up rescoping the role at the last minute to someone more senior. And he was kind enough to introduce me to the hiring manager. So it was a network introduction that got me to the top of the list, which is definitely something I advise in the current job market. Is networking is like the top way to get yourself to the top of a hiring stack these days.
Yeah, I think like the unspoken theme of the Beyond the Hire podcast is your network is your net worth, because it comes up every single conversation we have when it comes to recruitment. What was your job title when you joined Miro?
I was a senior business recruiter. So I hired for go-to-market. I was actually hired, ironically, to support specifically customer success. I spent a good portion of my time, though, hiring for sales and really built that team. I think we 3x'd the size of the team over the course of the time I was there. But go-to-market was really my bread and butter when I first started as a senior recruiter.
And how did having been laid off influence you and kind of your strategy as a recruiter?
Great question. It certainly reminded me that good talent does still get laid off. I think all too often we stigmatize talent that ends up in the worst possible scenario situation when a company overhires or
Yeah.
no longer needs the project team and lays them off. All too often that talent, I find I'm having to educate hiring managers or founders that they're not broken goods. They potentially are also very high performers on a team, and they would work very, very well at a new company. So I made sure to bring that lens as well during the pandemic, and now even in the last 18 months where we've continued to see mass layoffs in our industry, that those are the folks that we should still be going after. It's not just sourcing the people that are currently in seat at the companies that we want to recruit from.
I think that's really heartwarming to hear because obviously we work with a lot of hiring managers who don't necessarily feel that way or share your opinion. And I'm sure we have a lot of candidates listening right now who have gone through layoffs and have had to
Mhm.
talk about that. What would be your recommendation in how they broach that topic, right? When a hiring manager asks them about it?
Yeah, I would say get ahead of it. I generally asked for letters of recommendation at the top of the interview funnel if it was a layoff case, especially if they left the company on good terms and it wasn't a performance-based layoff decision. The previous leader was usually more than happy to give a positive reference or even proactively send a letter of recommendation. So that would be a big piece of advice that I would give to folks that find themselves laid off and currently in the job market, especially if it's recent. Don't be shy to ask your peers, your cross functional partners, or your previous manager to write something in advance and add that to your application package just to get it squared away that I'm still a great candidate. I'm still very skilled. I'm still a high performer. And here's what all of my peers and my leaders had to say about me. I was just part of an unfortunate business decision.
That's really, really good advice. And I don't think, Aisha, have you heard that before? Ask for letters of recommendation?
No, I haven't. I feel like now I'm like
Yeah.
keeping that in mind
Yeah.
for sure.
God, if you're ever laid off.
For the future, I'm
Hopefully
like,
not.
smart.
She's like, let me store that away. For those who don't know, I am Aisha's manager. So I'm like, I'm not about to lay you off. You're fine.
I know. I know it would never be your decision.
This would be a really unfortunate way for you to find out as well.
Be like, Aisha, so while we're recording this podcast with Megan here, this is really why we're having this conversation. God, I feel like this opens me up to so many lawsuits. Whatever I'm saying right now, don't sue me, Aisha. Moving on really quickly from that. So when you joined Miro, which again I think most people now know Miro, there were 250 people, and just to get the number right, when you left, there were 1,800, or there are now 1,800 people.
Yeah, so at our peak during my journey there, we hit just over 2,000
Wow.
Mironeers. We
Oh
did
wait, what
go
do you
through.
call the people?
Oh my
Mironeers?
gosh, Mironeers. Yes, internally the team is called Mironeers.
Cute.
It was, yes, very cute. We unfortunately during my tenure went through two rounds of layoffs, so I think we ended around 1,800 before I left. Still a pretty substantial size company to go from sub 300 to well over 1,000 folks. The feeling of the company, the process of the company certainly changes when you go from early Series B to Series C or a more mature or established company.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't want to keep harping on layoffs, but again, you having gone through that and then being part of probably the team who has to now do layoffs,
Yeah.
what was the strategy? And do you think the company handled it well? Any tips or advice for other people who have to then lay off teams?
Ooh, well, yeah, that's well, try to avoid it at all costs.
Yes. Tip
So
one.
don't overhire. And I think that generally companies, when we hear about like topics like talent density, we're already seeing that companies are trying to right size themselves. It's no longer the days of like just hyper scaling, which is where we were in 2021 when it was certainly both an
Yes.
employees market, but we were seeing a lot of hyper growth happening, and I think the industry has started to really right itself. So I'm hoping that this layoff trend is hopefully coming to a close. Did Miro do it well? In a lot of ways, yes, I would say we did it with the most empathy that a company can do when it comes to the personal conversations that were had the day of, the type of package that was given to our departing Mironeers. The decisions were not made lightly, although I was not the final decision maker in either of the layoff rounds that my team was a part of. I do know that the criteria that was used from a business perspective and a finance perspective was made with care. Still doesn't make the outcome very nice because it's still people's lives that are impacted when we have to go through those. But we did try and send off our former partners with as much grace, integrity, and support as we possibly could.
Okay, so let's move on from the layoff topic. Although, again, I think a lot of people are just super interested in it from both perspectives, the candidate as well as the hiring manager perspective. But there were a lot of hires at Miro, and you were promoted a few times. Can you talk a little bit about the hiring strategy across the different departments or the departments go to market that you were involved with specifically, and how candidates could make sure that they stood out to you?
Yeah, such a great question. So the hiring strategy was really devising what the ideal candidate profile was across both sales, customer success, marketing, and within those subsets of those orgs. Because obviously the ICP is going to be different, whether we're talking to a strategic account executive, an SDR, or a customer success manager. So over time, we evolved into pretty solid and streamlined evidence-based hiring machine. So kickoffs were quite robust, or intake meetings were quite robust with hiring managers. We really dialed in on, of course, experience, technical competencies, soft skill competencies, how we were going to assess for culture add, who were the top performers. So how did we assess for the hiring bar, and had both a list of companies and personas that recruiting would source for in order to ensure that we were really honing in on the right profile and skill sets that would be successful at Miro. And that was tested over time. So we would also track general quality of hire to see who was meeting or exceeding expectations on performance reviews, who lasted 12 plus months, and then would retro the folks that maybe didn't perform well, what backgrounds they came from, how well did they perform in interviews, and try and learn from those interview loops.
That sounds really analytical, and I like that. Are there any takeaways you can share with us, like the types of backgrounds that you found to be the most effective?
I think that is very company specific, because at Restaurant 365, we would have looked for a different sales person than we may have looked at Miro, than we look at Miter. What I will say, though, was a through line maybe throughout all three of those SaaS companies I've worked for are general soft skill competencies, maybe even across all of go-to-market. So the concept of team centricity or winning as a team was something we constantly tested for. So have you worked in a team environment? Do you like working in a team environment? Do you generally like working in a fast-paced, somewhat ambiguous team environment? Or do you like being a lone wolf and being a cog in the wheel, and you've got your one piece of the pie, and you could take or leave whether or not you're really working with other partners? I found in all three of the companies I've worked for recently, we really hired for team centricity, passion, and how that may become or manifest itself would be, someone who is really meticulous on their sales process, somebody who was a top performer, somebody who really understands their business and is sort of obsessed in understanding their business and gets a lot of drive over owning whatever, whether it's marketing or their sales territory or the customer that they're onboarding. You can find ways to derive evidence of that in an interview process. And we always looked for that, both at Miro and then now at Miter. Customer centricity would be a third. So we're nothing without our customer. If you don't really care about whether or not the customer is going to be onboarded well, whether or not you're really understanding the customer problem, if you're doing discovery from a sales perspective, if you don't know the customer persona you're going after from a marketing perspective, those are all key components to being successful as a business. So we're, again, nothing without our customers. So we would always test for that. Then the last, I would say that's been a through line throughout the 3 early stage startup companies I've worked with would be growth mindset. So are you embracing of challenges? Are you okay with ambiguity? Are you persistent? Are you willing to learn from feedback? Are you willing to give feedback, or do you just sweep it under the rug? Do you learn from your failures, or do you view them as opportunities? Do you sort of walk through your whatever your role is as an owner? We certainly test for those things as well.
That's really good. And I'm assuming a lot of this, obviously, you can't get from a first interview, or it might be
Right.
difficult. So, what are some interview green flags in your experience that you're always like, okay, that's going to be someone we push through to the next round?
That's a great question. So I would say how detailed somebody is in understanding their business. So if I'm asking, tell me about your experience being a sales manager at Salesforce, how well do they talk about the details of their business? What is the energy level that they use when talking about their business? But not to say that everyone has to have like volume 10 levels of energy on a recruiter screen, but is there some semblance of like, I actually really care about this work that I'm doing at my current company, even if I'm looking to interview somewhere else? I would say also, do you talk in we's versus I's? Like, here's a project that we accomplished together. Here's my piece of it, but here was the outcome for us and for our customer. Like, thinking about business impacts or talking about customer impacts, like there's easy ways to pick up on specific words that are used or how detailed somebody can get, even in a recruiter screen, that can give you some signal on whether or not they may have evidence of some of those culture adds or behavioral soft skills that we'd be looking for.
So, what are the red flags? I mean, besides maybe saying a lot of I.
There's some of the red flags. This one may be pretty obvious, but if you've done no research on the company at all that you're interviewing for, generally not a great flag or a great signal that you're even interested in the opportunity, given that it's currently an employer market. I'm doing a lot less selling on calls than I've had to do previously. So that does set a candidate apart. If you've done at least a modicum of research on MITRE and have interesting questions for me or curiosity about what we do, very, very strong green flag, in my opinion. Another red flag be someone who gives me one word answers where I have to really dig if there's really very little energy on the call or they're surprised to hear from me. Something like that is actually very small and happens more frequently than you might think. If we've got a scheduled call and I pick up and say, "Hi, this is Meg with MITRE." "Oh, that's right. We had this call. Great to hear from you." Like, we're not off to a great start when that happens. So I'd say prepare for a recruiter screen just as you might prepare for a hiring manager interview. We are still part of the interview process. I think sometimes the thought among the industry is that a recruiter screen is just a formality call. And oftentimes we're the gatekeepers to whether or not you are going to meet with the hiring manager. We know the role. We've kicked it off. We understand the scope. We generally understand the team really well if we've been there for a little while and have met with folks and are deeply embedded in the go-to-market team. We're seen as partners. So we're not going to waste the hiring manager's time if we can suss out things ahead of a screen. So, or using a screen rather. So I would say prepare for a recruiter interview just as you would prepare for any other part of the interview process.
That's really good to know. And that kind of made me think about something else. So, and I actually don't think, I should correct me if I'm wrong, I've asked anyone about this, but pre-pandemic, most, at least in my personal experience, interviews were in person. Whereas during and post, a lot of it is actually virtual, even if you are in the same city, at least until like the final round. How does that change how you hire people? And what is something you could be looking for? Because I know for sure when I was doing, interviews in person, I dressed to the nines. Whereas I feel like now virtually, people don't as much anymore. And I do think it's disappointing.
Yeah. Well, I also think that that depends on the company too. I was recently reminded that I had a sales manager at Miro who said off the cuff one time, "Oh, if someone showed up to a call with a suit and tie on, that would weird me out." Because it just wasn't our vibe. It's just, I showed up in a blazer to this audio interview
Yeah.
just because that's how I feel my best.
Yes.
But you want people to show up authentically. So if wearing, a ball cap on a call for MITRE in particular, for a SaaS HCM platform for the construction industry is your vibe, that's okay. That's okay. But did you prepare for the interview? Do you care about the products that we're selling? Do you care about our mission and vision? Those will be the things that we test for. So I would say, to your point, less so on the visual aesthetic and is someone dressing up in a blazer or in a suit to come to an interview. We certainly, I think, move more quickly because everything is virtual and we don't have to fly someone in. It's very rare that we fly someone in for a late stage interview or have to plan for commutes or travel, especially if it's a virtual on-site and it's going to be multiple conversations in one day. We don't have to plan around someone's work schedule in order to do that. They don't need to take time off from work in order to do that. We can schedule it all virtually, and it certainly makes, I think, generally our time to fill much more quick because everything is virtual. I think where we're seeing maybe some pitfalls in virtual interviewing is the use of AI. So you've got folks that have become really savvy in using AI and can listen to a question being asked on a call and have an answer essentially spit out for them. So we're very cognizant of folks that may be reading from a script, or if they can answer one question at face value, ensuring that we're digging and asking for specifics about the story that they're telling or about the hypothetical that they're sharing with us. And I think that will continue to be something that we have to just be really cognizant of, because AI is not going anywhere.
Yeah.
But we've certainly seen the use of AI a lot more in interviews than obviously we would have if we were all live and in person together.
That's so interesting. I love AI. We're huge ChatGPT fans. I love Perplexity, and now they're all amazing, especially if you need to get some, answers very quickly. And I was just on a call with the company completely focused on making sure your brand is more visible on, platforms like ChatGPT and Perplexity, which is again so fascinating. But the fact that people would use that live, to prepare, I get it. But live to just, get answers to your questions really quickly is really interesting. So what's like a dead giveaway? You said you had to prod a little bit more, but what's a dead giveaway?
And you can generally tell if someone's reading off of a script. So I would say if someone gives a relatively canned answer and they're unable to provide details when you follow up, they may have either prepared for that evidence-based question or that tell me about a time question based on the focus areas that we provided them to prepare for. And like you mentioned, it's very easy to type in, tell me about a time you had to problem solve through a customer issue, and you can get an answer, but can you actually give the details of the answer? I think that's the tip, is ensuring that as an interviewer, regardless of where you are in the hiring process, you have to be actively listening and ensure that you're getting each component of the story in detail. So a lot of folks will call it the STAR method. So the situation, the task, the action, result, and ask those follow-up questions so that you know that it's an authentic answer, that they were actually the one that led through the problem, and that they can back up the result. Generally, if you're using AI, you're not going to be able to pivot that quickly on your feet.
What about, I'm just going to grill you on AI. What about CVs? Have you noticed a difference now in CVs submitted with AI becoming more popular?
Yes, we do get fake resumes, specifically in engineering. We'll get fake resumes.
I know, Bits obviously focuses on go-to-market. So we do, sales, customer success,
Sure.
marketing, ops. So we don't deal a lot with the software engineers. Are there any other things like this that you want to enlighten us on? I'm fascinated with how people use AI.
Less on the go-to-market side. I would say one thing that folks are using AI now for, which you've already mentioned on the call, is interview prep. So as far as advice for candidates that might find themselves in the job market, it's very daunting. If you've been at a company for a long time, where interviewing is a skill.
Yeah.
It is truly a skill that you have to practice. So I know that there are platforms that will actually do mock interviews with you and will essentially give you AI driven feedback on how well you answered the question. So I would certainly encourage folks to be using tools that way. Maybe just don't use ChatGPT on the live interview itself.
That's really good advice. And that's actually, even if you are employed, but just want to practice selling your product, it is actually really fascinating. And you can tell the AI to be like, be a difficult prospect, or this is your job title. And it is. We've talked about that too. That's really, really fascinating. That is very, very good advice for interview prep. So that is allowed. That is allowed to use AI in that way, but don't use it during the interview. Fascinating. I feel like I've learned so much. All right. I do want to move on to Miter. So how did you go from Miro to Miter, or how did you find out about Miter?
So Miro was a fantastic journey. By the time I left, I was leading the global recruiting team across AMER, JPAC, and EMEA. And it was awesome. It was an awesome ride. I do have two really little ones at home. And I decided that it was time for me to go back to something smaller, really own building a function from the ground up, and maybe spend a little bit more time not chasing the sun from an hour's perspective and spend some time with my kiddos. So I started peeking around the job market, and again, was very fortunate to have my name brought up as an introduction to CEO at Miter. So we had a first chat, and I was just blown away with the mission and vision of the company, with the general sense of what they value from an employee experience. And there was just no ego about the way that they were building the company. And I was immediately drawn in. So very fortunate that they decided to pick me to lead the talent acquisition strategy and build the team. But it's been really rewarding and really, really fun.
That's beautiful. And actually leads me to my next question, because obviously a lot of candidates on the job market want to work at the really big brand, the big tech companies, like maybe a Salesforce or a Google or Miro, right? Monday, whatever, the big companies. But I think what you said was really interesting. You went from a bigger company, right, 1,800 people, to a much smaller one, because for your life and the stage of life you're in, that made more sense. For people who are, just targeting the big names, what would your advice be, or what would you say to them to make sure that that is the right fit for them for this stage of life?
Yeah, I would obviously read reviews of the company, of the hiring process, read Crunchbase, ensure that there's longevity with the company. So do your due diligence from that perspective, but also evaluate based on your stage of your life and where you want to be from a career trajectory standpoint. What is the company that's going to offer those things to you over the course of the long term? Is having the name Salesforce going to do that for you based on what your career goals are? Awesome. Is building something from the ground up and potentially seeing it to IPO exciting to you? Then maybe go back to, an early stage startup with a company that has a mission and vision that you can get behind, like Miter. So I think that that's so personal, but do the work internally and then do your research externally before you make a decision just because it's a name brand that you might recognize.
Could you tell, for those listening who don't know, us a little bit about what Miter does?
Yeah, so I get so excited talking about this. So Miter's vision is to build a better world. I mean, that is like our tagline. That is what we hold dear to us, and we have the opportunity to reverse declining construction productivity by helping the next generation of contractors build our critical infrastructure. And what I tend to lean on when I'm talking to candidates is like, these are the folks that are going to rebuild the Pacific Palisades. Like, these are the folks that are building the schools for your kids and your roads and our bridges. And the work that they do is so important, but all too often they're left behind in modern advanced technology just to do simple things like pay their people right. So our product is a human capital management platform that helps contractors and construction companies both recruit, hire, pay, and retain their people. So we are essentially allowing them the opportunity to have an automated and efficient way to do the things that they need to do in the back of their office so that they can go actually do the things in the field that build our world.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And also love seeing you shine as you're talking about it. That's really beautiful. And honestly, I can imagine people on a first call with you being super inspired and eager then to come work at MITRE. It's an easy sell. That's really beautiful. So let's talk about your hiring strategy at MITRE versus at Miro, because I'm sure again, you guys had some overhiring, had to do layoffs, and also again, much bigger company compared to how you guys handle it today.
Yes, that's so true. And one of the things that really drew me in as I continued my interview conversations at MITRE was around headcount planning, how large we were going to get in the first year, how we think about adding net new headcount. And one thing that I will say about our co-founders at MITRE is they are incredibly intentional about how quick and how necessary each and every role is that we hire for. So instead of the hire fast, hire faster pace that I was at Miro and that team was at Miro, everything is about quality, quality, quality. We would rather miss our quote unquote hiring targets for Q1 as long as we are so excited and sure about the folks we did bring on board in Q1. So that strategy has actually been very different. Not that Miro didn't also hire for quality, but we certainly indexed also on speed. Whereas at MITRE, we're far less concerned with how quickly. We would actually rather index on having a lean and diverse team and have folks that are going to take us to that next level and stay with us long term versus just hiring really quick for ensuring that we have bums in seats, so to speak.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And then for any executives listening, because obviously you work with pets, what would your advice be for how big your talent acquisition or HR team should be? And when should you bring in an agency, like for example, Bets? At what stage in the process?
Yeah, and I think MITRE did this really well. I think that your initial hires usually come from your network if you're building, an early seed company, as they should. They should be folks that you've worked with, you know their work ethic and the quality of the work that they put out, and you trust them. When you're that small a team, it's all about trust and about output. And then I would say when you know that you're going to be hitting your 20th hire, your 30th hire, your 40th hire, it's going to be really important to bring in agency support, especially agency support that is specialized in the areas in which you're going to be making those hires. And our team at Bets is just been phenomenal to partner with. They're essentially an extension of the team. And quite frankly, they know the profile and the company and the candidate better than I did when I first joined. So I leaned on our partners at Bets quite a lot when I first got onboarded to educate me about the company that I had joined.
That's amazing to hear. And any advice, right? Because we were talking about candidate greens and red flags for companies bringing on an agency. Any advice for what to look out for when you're deciding who you want your partner to be? Because, like you said, they're an extension of your team, or at least Bets is.
I recommend when we brought on agency and RPO support at Miro as well, vet and interview the recruiting support that you will be working with. I think it's really important to do that. Don't skip that step. Understand what they've hired for previously, understand what their hiring bar looks like. Is it someone that you're going to want to work with day in and day out? I know our partners at Bets have a tremendous reputation that preceded them when I joined because they were true partners with our hiring managers, setting up interview questions and helping devise a strong candidate experience throughout the process and ensuring that we had offers accepted majority of the time. All of that is really important. You don't want a partner who, A, doesn't know the market very well, may not have a strong process, isn't so great on candidate experience, isn't going to want to be the brand, especially the first stage of the brand that you're setting for yourself as an early stage company. it's all about that employer branding. And our partners may not be internal recruiters for us, but they certainly are brand advocates for us. So my advice distilled down is please interview your agency recruiting team, just as if you were bringing them on board internally.
I think that's really, really good advice. I've definitely, prior to joining Bets, working at tech companies, I worked with some agencies who were not as efficient.
I have as well.
Useful. We won't name names.
We will not name names. No.
We don't dish on Beyond the Hire, but it's very good. We're almost out of time, so I want to ask just one final question, because you have had a very impressive career in recruitment and talent acquisition. What is your advice for people who would want to follow in your footsteps?
Ooh, goodness. I was the very fortunate recipient of some incredible mentorship over the course of my career. Anytime imposter syndrome would creep up, which happens now, even still, I had a team of mentors and champions, both internally and externally, that I ensured to lean on when I had a problem I didn't know how to solve, when I was feeling unsure about my capabilities, when I needed to just get different perspective. Because sometimes when you're in a company and you've got this problem that you need to solve, it's really easy to just live in an echo chamber. So I ensured that I had a network of mentors, both internally and externally, that have helped guide me on my career and have told me sometimes some difficult feedback. Hey, Meg, I don't know that you're approaching this in the right way, or maybe think about this differently, or hey, Meg, you really should go for this promotion. You are actually ready for it. So seek out those champions for yourself. And I would really strongly advise to have recurring mentorship meetings. Don't just have one-off meetings, have them be recurring so that you are continuing your career. You have to hold on to your own career development so that every career step you make is intentional.
And as senior as you are now, do you still have your mentors today?
I met with both of them last week.
That's amazing.
I do. I do. I am so honored that a previous direct report of mine has now asked me to be a formal mentor of his, which it doesn't get better than that as a leader. So I feel like I'm able to pay it forward now, which is great. But yes, I still meet with those mentors now I would say every couple of months. I have a check-in to see both how they're doing, but also tell them about maybe what I'm trying to solve or what I'm feeling nervous about, or hey, what's going on in the industry you're leading right now, just to have a pulse on different perspectives. It's really useful.
And how do you find a mentor if it's maybe not the person you're reporting into? How do you go about finding someone?
Yeah, if your company isn't quite large enough to have mentor mentee programs, some companies do have those established, and I would certainly recommend taking your company up on those types of benefits. One way that I have found, at least networking, maybe a mentor that hasn't stuck, but networking is joining webinars, going to the conferences, going to the dinners for the specific industry that you're in, and putting yourself out there to say hello. You never, ever know how long-term relationships can start from just putting yourself out there. So one other piece of advice that I have for candidates when we talk about getting yourself noticed for a job, the best way to do that is through your network. But while you're on your job search, don't just focus on applying for roles, focus on expanding your network. So if that means putting a goal of having 4 or 5 cold reach outs to leaders or peers within your industry at different companies that you aspire to work towards, send a LinkedIn message. Hey, can we have a coffee chat? I would love to bounce this topic off of you and see if we can, maybe there's some synergy there. And generally, relationships develop organically. So that would be another way if your company doesn't offer something like that, and joining the communities within the industry that you're in specifically, and then just saying hello.
That's amazing advice. You've inspired me. Bets does have a mentorship program, but mostly on the recruiting side. because obviously we have a lot of them, and some of them have been with us for over a decade, which is wild. But you've inspired me, so I'll leave it at that because I think that's beautiful advice. So thank you, Megan, for coming on Beyond the Hire, the podcast.
So glad to have been here. Thank you for such a fun conversation. And a shout out to Juliet and Kylie, our Bets partners. They're just the best. So we love them.
So happy to hear. They are absolute rock stars.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, team. It was great to meet you both.